I'm in a different room. I'm in Caleb's office right now because I have people staying at my house and we don't have that many rooms. So there's people in my office, so I have to do it in his office. So don't get used to this extremely aesthetically pleasing background and very nice camera, okay? Oh yeah, how am I gonna do this with one camera angle? I gotta get creative with it. Crime, conspiracy, cults, serial killers, and murder. All things that I love to consume, and I know you do too, you sick, beautiful, very aesthetically pleasing looking, intellectual-minded freak. And today, we are talking about 3 insane disappearances. And let me tell you, some of these are really, really eerie. And it boggles my mind to think of some of these people that have been missing for centuries, and with modern technology, we still can't locate them. But without further ado, let's unbuckle our seatbelts, go Mach 5 down the highway, slam on the brakes, and bust through this windshield into these 3 mysterious disappearance cases together. This video was a doozy, a lot to write, and sometimes it can be really overwhelming, but thank goodness I had the help of Grammarly. Thank you to Grammarly for sponsoring this video. Grammarly is usually viewed as a spelling or grammar tool, which it definitely is, but many people are unaware of the AI features and how they can help professionals, or myself, or you, work with projects, proposals, presentations, YouTube videos, and more. Grammarly is an AI writing partner that works where you work, so you can craft quality writing faster across different platforms. No more copying and pasting like other AI tools. And how I've applied Grammarly into my everyday life, and especially my job, is writing the documents and deep dives that I do for you guys every single week. They are a lot to write, and Lord knows I make a lot of mistakes and sometimes need help with context and the way I portray things. And what's really cool is that Grammarly understands your context and provides relevant and high quality suggestions. Like if I wanted to sound more professional in my deep dives, or if I wanted to present myself as more lackadaisical as I do, Grammarly knows how to dissect that and apply it. It helps me with summarizing certain information because sometimes I really want to give every single detail. And some of the really cool features if you upgrade to Grammarly Pro are 1, clarity full sentence rewrites. Basically, you can rewrite run-on sentences to make it more clear and effective. And I really like the setting goals features on Grammarly Pro as well. You can set your goals to ensure that the writing matches the tone of your writing, which is really, really helpful. And with the AI tool available at the ready, it works extremely fast and efficiently. Also, I'm so bad for writing run-on sentences, which is extremely hard to say when I'm reading them out loud. So it helps you rewrite run-on sentences as well to make it more clear and effective, which is awesome. And not to mention, it also helps with me writing emails because I'm terrible at writing professional emails. So I can literally ask Grammarly to help me write a professional email, or even work messages to my numerous group chats I have for work. All in all, Grammarly has helped me immensely in my writing game. In fact, 96% of Grammarly users reports that Grammarly helps them craft more impactful writing, which I'm a stan. So click my custom link down in the description below, grammarly.com/Chris, and get Grammarly today to level up on your productivity. Thank you to Grammarly for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to it. So the first disappearance we are going to talk about is the Flannan Isles lighthouse keepers. So the Flannan Isles lighthouse was built by David Allen Stevenson from 1895 to 1899. Took a long time. And it was a state-of-the-art lighthouse because it had a small railway specifically designed to supply the lighthouse keepers, because they would be out there for a really long time. And on December 7th, 1899, the lighthouse was lit. Now imagine this, you're in the year 1900, and you and 2 other men were tasked with operating a brand new lighthouse with its own personal railroad. Sounds like a nightmare, to be honest. But excitement fills you as you begin a new life journey, and all seems well. Unknown to you, the lighthouse had an ominous aura about it, and your life was about to completely change. So on December 5th, 1900 doesn't even sound like a year to me. It sounds like a fake year for some reason. But I know it's not. A ship called the Arctur was passing by the Flannan Isles, and at the time there was a crazy storm that made visibility nearly non-existent. So they looked at their maps and they saw that there should be a lighthouse that could steer them away from the sharp cliffs on the Isles. However, there was no light at all. Captain Holman quickly jotted down this information and, once they reached their destination, reported it to the Northern Lighthouse Board, which was the committee under which the lighthouse operated and reported. And once they were notified, the board sent out a relief ship called the Hesperus, which was set to sail out on December 20th, but could not leave until the 26th due to bad weather. So when they arrived at the island, they searched for 3 men: James Duquette, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur, who were supposed to be operating the lighthouse. Damn, look at those mustaches. Those are incredible. And on the relief ship was the 4th keep, Joseph Moore, who would occasionally travel to the island to help and swap with someone in case they wanted to briefly head back to the mainland, just give him a bit of a break. So Moore was the first person to reach the lighthouse and immediately knew something was wrong. The lighthouse was eerily quiet, except for a canary still alive in its cage. He quote-unquote said, "I did not take time to search further, for I only too well knew something serious had occurred." What a fun way of speaking. And he also said, "I darted out and made for the landing." And so Moore hurried back to the ship and grabbed some of the crew members to help investigate. And upon entering the lighthouse, they investigated the kitchen first. And on the table was a full meal left completely untouched, and their plates and silverware were still neatly placed. And supposedly waiting to be used. And laying on the ground next to the table was 1 chair, while the rest was unaltered. So moving to the bedrooms, all the men's beds were made, and all of the items were still undisturbed. And the men did take note that 2 of the 3 oilskins were missing from the room. And oilskins are waterproof clothing, traditionally made from heavy canvas or cotton treated with oil and waxed, and it was designed to keep sailors and fishermen dry in the harsh weather. They typically include jackets, pants, and hats to repel rain and sea spray. The 3rd one remained in the room, and this shows that protocol was broken because the rules stated that if the conditions outside were stormy, then wearing the oilskins was mandatory. And the light at the top of the structure was clean and still had plenty of fuel, indicating that the last shift was conducted properly before the keepers had vanished. And lastly, and very strangely, all of the clocks in the lighthouse had stopped and were unwound, meaning that the keepers had been gone for some time at this point. And checking the logbook, the crew learned a lot more about the final days of the missing men. And Marshall appeared to be the one writing the entries. It would say, December 12th, 1900. Gale north by northwest. Sea lashed to fury. Storm still raging. Windy steady. Storm bound. Severe winds, the likes of which I have never seen before. And he also recorded that James Duquette, the head keeper, had been very quiet, while Donald MacArthur, known for his tough and resilient nature, had been crying. Next entry, December 13th, 1900. Storm continued through the night. Wind shifted west by north. Duquette, quiet. MacArthur, praying. And this entry implies that the storm has not let up, and its notes and an apparent sense of dread among the keepers. And MacArthur is described as praying, which, like his previous emotional outburst, was very unusual for his character. Next entry, December 14th, 1900. No relief. Storm still raging. Sea rough. Prayers all day. And with no break in the storm, the men had felt very trapped, as if something was actively targeting or threatening them. So this paints the picture of an intense, possibly supernatural experience, as the men appeared to be deeply frightened and unsettled. Next entry, December 15th, 1900. Storm ended, sea calm. God is over all. So the abrupt end of the storm is reported here, yet no one has ever fully explained what followed. And the phrase, God is over all, has led to various interpretations, with some suggesting it indicates a sense of resignation or foreboding. And looking outside the lighthouse on the island, everything appeared to be in order except for the landing platform on the west side of the island, which was heavily damaged. Iron railings were bent and storage box was torn open, and its contents were scattered everywhere. And as the search continued and the waters were combed, no bodies ever turned up. And on December 29th, Robert Murhead, a lighthouse board superintendent and the man who had recruited the 3 keepers, conducted an official investigation into their disappearances. And based on the clothing that was left behind, he noted that Marshall and Duquette had gone to the western landing and that Marshall had left in a simple shirt during a heavy rain. So Muirhead believed that the three men were down at the landing securing a package that maybe went rogue and came up and possibly swept them away. And he was quote unquote to say, "From evidence which I was able to procure, I was satisfied that the men had been on duty up till dinner time on Saturday the 15th of December, that they had gone down to secure a box in which the mooring ropes, landing ropes, etc. were kept and which secured in a crevice in the rock about 110 feet 34 meters above sea level, and that an extra large sea had rushed up the face of the rock, had gone above them, and coming down with immense force had swept them completely away." So what caused the men to abandon their lighthouse, and where did they go? Because although Muirhead claims that this possibly happened, he doesn't know for sure. But the first theory is the rogue wave. The most believable theory, that is, as well. But I don't like believable theories, I like the creepy, eerie ones. But again, the most believable theory is the rogue wave came and swept the members while they were working in the storm. And on the west end of the isle, there are many caves and gullies that which water smashes into. And during massive storms, these caves and gullies act as cannons that shoot out water high into the sky. So what if both Marshall and Duquette rushed out of the lighthouse with their oilskins to strap down some loose cargo, and MacArthur stayed behind as is the protocol. And then while working, the two men were swept away. And thinking the other two should be back by now, MacArthur ran to where they were and was also swept away. Possibly. And this would explain why there was only one oilskin left and why the bodies were never found. And it would also explain why the west platform was damaged and that the crate was smashed against the rocks. And adding to this theory that MacArthur was known to break fights and get drunk. So some believe that he could have started a fight after being cooped up at the lighthouse for 3 days straight. So they rushed outside, were fighting, and were inevitably swept away. Possibly. And the remaining keeper came outside to look for them and was also swept away. But the other theory is the supernatural theory, which I find very interesting. Because it was clear that something must have occurred that abruptly forced the lighthouse keepers out. Some believe that the two men ran outside with their coats, and the last one, who feared being left behind, ran out of the lighthouse without his raincoat. Something must have been inside the lighthouse with them that caused them to flee. And with the massive storm going on outside, they were trapped with whatever was tormenting them at the time. And this would explain why they were praying and crying. They must have seen something unexplainable or something terrifying that must have scared them to death. And Scottish culture has plenty of creatures that roam the oceans that are known to scare and kill humans. The Bathir, sorry if I'm saying that wrong. The Bathir is a dragon or serpent-like creature believed to bring storms and lightning, often living in caves and feared for its deadly bite. And then there's the Kelpie, which is a water spirit who appears as a beautiful horse by lochs and rivers, luring people to their doom by dragging them into the water. And lastly, there's the Selkies. They're shape-shifting seals that shed their skins to become human on land, often marrying humans, but ultimately longing for the sea. So could they have seen one of these creatures or had been lured out by one of them? Or could it have been a banshee, otherwise called a washerwoman? In Scottish folklore, there's a ghost called a banshee, which typically depicts a woman wailing or screaming in agony as she washes the clothes of people she's about to kill. That just gave me chills. That's fucking scary. So could they have encountered one of these beings on the island's western end and attempted to hide in the lighthouse until someone got inside? It's hard to tell, but a lot of people believe that something got inside the lighthouse and caused the men to flee in a hurry. And next is aliens, okay? Stay with me. All right. It is the final theory, but it could be alien abduction. What if, over the course of the storm, an unidentified object had either landed or been flying around the lighthouse, making weird noises and flashing lights? Some believe that a UFO abducted the crew after they ran out of the lighthouse to see what it was and tried to escape. And perhaps the damage that was done on the western landing was not done by a wave, but a UFO landing. The damaged railing at the top of the west landing is 110 10 feet above sea level. And that would take a monstrous wave to reach that high. So if the crew was abducted, it would explain why they were never seen again. But whatever happened on that cold December night will probably remain one of the greatest mysteries on Earth. How could 3 experienced lighthouse workers just abandon their post and disappear? Something very serious or eerie may have occurred, and unfortunately, only they will ever know. And that brings us to our next mass disappearance, which is the infamous Roanoke colony. So the lost colony of Roanoke has intrigued both historians and conspiracy theorists alike, like myself. And if you haven't heard of the colony of Roanoke, I'll fill you in with a brief history lesson to give you some context. So in 1524, an Italian explorer by the name of Giovanni de Verrazzano set sail to the New World and sailed along the eastern coast. And believing that the coast of North Carolina, more specifically the Pamlico Sound, was the Pacific Ocean, he was unsure of what he was looking at. And following his expedition, Queen Elizabeth I ordered a charter to Humphrey Gilbert and later, after his death, awarded his brothers, including Sir Walter Raleigh. And this expedition was one of the earliest attempts by England to colonize the Americas. And once they finished, they reported that the available land looked extremely promising and claimed that the native peoples were very amicable. And Governor Ralph Lane believed to have found a good spot for a colony. So he established and led the Lane colony in 1585. And the colony wouldn't last long as their supplies ran out quickly. And the native peoples, believe it or not, in the area were not too keen on foreigners using their resources and building on their land. So in a desperate effort, Lane led an expedition deeper inland in the hope of finding either a better spot for the colony or some large cache for valuable resources in an attempt to find some reason to stay. And ultimately, the expedition was a waste. And so in 1586, it was decided that the colony would be abandoned. However, Raleigh wanted to try again and convince about 115 people to stay and move to Roanoke Island, which was just a few miles off the coast. And I want to preface that Raleigh never stepped foot in the Americas. He strictly managed the finances, basically, and was the landholder for the colony. He knew it wasn't safe to remain on the mainland, but hoped that they would have a better chance if they were off the coast. However, once the colony was actually established, they encountered a new group of people called the Croatans who lived on the south of the island. And compared to the Socotan tribe on the mainland, the Croatans were much more peaceful and supportive. They had a translator named Manteo, whose mother was the chieftain of the Croatans. And Croatans had attacked colonists a few times. However, Manteo would negotiate with his people and help them to remain peaceful for most of the time. But still needing supplies, John White, the appointed governor of the Roanoke colony, opted to sail back to England on August 27th, 1587, and would arrive in England on November 5th, 1587. And as fate would have it, White would be stuck in England due to the Spanish Armada planning a massive naval attack on London. And the Queen mandated that all ships that had come back to London could not leave in anticipation of the Spanish attack. So it took 2 years of waiting for White to get the okay to leave and go back to Roanoke. So in 1590, John was able to hop onto a privateering expedition and headed for the Caribbean to raid Spanish outposts. And when they would reach the Americas, eventually 2 ships, the Hopewell and the Moonlight, would divert from the main group and drop off White with much needed supplies. And the 2 ships first anchored on Croatan Island on August 12th. And everyone aboard the ships remained on the boats. And on the evening of August 5th, while stationed at the island's northern end, men aboard the ships could see giant billows of smoke rising above Roanoke Island. And wanting to investigate the island because of the smoke, White and his crew tried to cross the Pamlico Sound, but the bad weather would prevent the crew from landing. So on August 17th, White and a small group of men rowed to Roanoke after seeing another smokestack on the north part of the island. By the time they had made landfall, the sun had already set, so they decided to stay on their boats not to startle the colonists during the night. And when morning broke, other crew members arrived, and they began to search the island altogether. But immediately, something was off because nobody greeted them when they arrived. Yet there was fresh footprints in the sand near their boats. And one crew member noticed the letters CRO carved into a tree facing outward towards the bay. And moving from the beach to the colony, the houses and palisades, which were wooden fences meant to surround the town as a protective wall, were completely broken apart. And near a wall, there was a tree with the word Croatoan carved into the bark. And adding to the overall chaos was the fact that many of the colonists' belongings were scattered everywhere. Trunks of clothing and random belongings lay everywhere, even some of John White's stuff that he had left while on his trip to England. And after searching the entire island, no colonists were ever found. All 115 people completely disappeared. So the plan was to head back to Croatoan Island and see if any of the colonists were there. But things would fall apart when the Hopewell's anchor snapped, and the Moonlight opted to head back to England. The Hopewell agreed to stay in the Caribbean for the winter so John could be close and continue his investigation. However, they were blown off course, unfortunately, and forced to head back to England. And back in England, Rayleigh was more concerned with maintaining the monopoly of his land charters in Virginia than the well-being of the missing colonists, because we know he's a piece of shit. And for years, he tried to argue that the colonists were still alive, even though he had no proof of that at all. But that way, he could keep his charters. But it wasn't until 1594, when a petition was leveraged against him, that one of the colonists, Ananias Dare, was legally dead so that John Dare could legally inherit his father's estate. And this pushed Walter to go overseas and look for the missing colony. But then later revealed he was actually looking for the lost city of El Dorado on some defunct information. Shout out to El Dorado, it's one of my favorite movies as a kid. It's an animated movie, you should watch it if you haven't seen it. So eventually he sailed up and down the coast, but claimed he never made it to Croatoan or Roanoke due to the inclement weather. And his poor efforts allowed for a petition to go through, and in 1597, the inheritance was transferred. And later, in 1602, Rayleigh would send another expedition to look for the missing colony. And it was later found out through a ship itinerary that Walter sent the voyage not to find the colonists, but to harvest as much sassafras as possible and bring it back to England, because the price of sassafras skyrocketed in England. He is literally the embodiment of a piece of shit. So it was clear that Sir Walter Raleigh did not intend on finding the missing colonists and only cared about monies and his charters. But thankfully, in 1603, karma would hit this bitch in the back, and Walter would be arrested for taking part in the main plot, which is the follow-up to the By-plot. And the By-plot in 1603 was a scheme by a group of Catholic priests to kidnap King James I of England and force him to ease anti-Catholic laws. However, it was quickly discovered and thwarted. Fun word, thwarted. Use it today. And there were other attempts to find the colonists following Rayleigh's arrest. In 1603, a man by the name of Bartholomew Gilbert set sail to the islands in hopes of finding the new evidence. They wanted to arrive at the Chesapeake Bay and sail from there. However, bad weather caused them to land elsewhere and immediately get killed by native people. They didn't like people coming up on the land and taking it. Who would have thunk? You know, who would have thunk? Other inland theories suggest that in 1584, before John White left, Walter Raleigh told the colonists to go to a specific place along the river to harvest sassafras, as we know he loves sassafras. And today, this same area is the Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge. And found within the refuge were multiple small coffins with Christian imagery. So it is believed that Raleigh forced these people to live and work near alligator-infested waters, which I would not put past Raleigh at this point. And when Raleigh died in 1618, the rest of the survivors decided to go live with the Croatans. His greed really knows no bounds. So this, I don't know why, but this one is like the most believable for me. But there is also the Dare Stone, which is allegedly from John White's daughter, Eleanor Dare, whom he left behind on his resupply trip. And the stone is supposedly a message directly to John from his daughter, telling how the colony moved to the Chowan River, and she said that only 24 colonists had survived after 2 years. And then after an attack from native peoples, the group was down to 7. And the stone matches statements from William Strachey, an English writer from the time period who wrote a group of colonists getting attacked and only 7 surviving. But people question the age and authenticity of the stone based on chemical composition tests, but it still offers a new perspective in theory. And then there's the colonists that potentially assimilated with the native people. About 2 decades after the failure of the Roanoke colony, Jamestown was founded in 1607, permanently establishing the English peoples in the Americas. And well, according to numerous reports from Jamestown residents, they claim to see the lost colony residents working and living in several villages along the Roanoke River. And this theory kind of builds off the last theory that states the colony was massacred on its way inland. Instead of being completely killed off, they were captured or taken in by other local people. And even John Smith, who actually explored the area and helped establish Jamestown, claimed to encounter English-speaking people in surrounding villages. However, take this statement with a grain of salt, because it was well known that John Smith was a bit of a liar, mate. Bit of a liar. If the colonists lived among the native groups, they would likely have assimilated to varying degrees, adopting native cultures, clothing, and lifestyle. And this type of integration would have helped them survive by blending into the native community structure. And the settlers' European identity may have been gradually lost as they adapted to the natives' way of life, especially if they formed family units with native individuals over time, which is very, very likely. But in later centuries, some individuals and groups in North Carolina claimed descent from Roanoke settlers with specific native groups, like the Lumbee tribe, pointing to cultural and physical traits that may have been inherited from European ancestry. And there is also the Cora tree theory. The Cora tree is a legend on Hatteras Island that revolves around a mysterious woman named Cora, who arrived in the early 1700s with her baby, sparking local suspicions of witchcraft due to strange occurrences. These are the theories I like. And Captain Eli Brood from Salem, suspecting her as a witch, subjected her to trials which seemed to confirm his suspicions. When locals attempted to burn her at the stake, a storm struck, with lightning hitting a tree, and Cora disappeared, leaving behind an oak split in half, and the word Cora scorched into the bark. Ooh, I got chills. And some people speculated that Cora carved on the tree was actually left by the Roanoke colonists. It was found on Hatteras Island, which was formerly Croatan Island. And tests on the tree show that it was alive in the 1600s. And others believe that the witch had inhabited the island for centuries and was the direct cause of the colony's disappearance. So maybe they traveled to Croatan Island and encountered Cora, upset her, and caused her to curse them all or have them killed. And this next theory we're going to talk about involves cannibalism and zombies. Stay with me. And this theory states that the reason why nobody found any of the colonists anywhere is because they got so desperate and devolved into cannibalism. A select group of colonists started to cannibalize people. And since they were eating, they would have been the strongest members of the colony. And this led them to killing and eating the remaining colonists and surviving somewhere in the North Carolina woods. Just going completely feral, mate. They would have likely broken the bones to eat the marrow on the inside, leaving small fragments that have rotted away since then. And with cannibalism comes a lot of very deadly diseases. And this would lead to a zombie virus outbreak. Stay with me. Andre Freeman, a researcher from the Zombie Research Society, yes, that is real, suggests a zombie outbreak as a possible explanation. He references Harvard archaeologist Lawrence Stager evidence of cannibalism at the site of the local tribal reports of internal conflict. And Freeman theorizes that a sudden zombie plague could have decimated the settlers, leaving no survivors at all. And over time, any remaining colonial zombies would have decayed due to lack of new hosts, leaving no trace. And that brings us to our final mass disappearance, which is the Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. So on March 8th, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 departed from Kuala Lumpur International Airport and was set to arrive at Beijing Capital International Airport a few hours later. But unbeknownst to the passengers and the crew on board, their entire flight would disappear almost without trace. So at 12:41 a.m. Saturday, March 8th, 2014, the weather conditions were clear. And on their flight plan, which was going north from Malaysia over the Gulf of Thailand, then across Vietnam and onward toward China, there was no sign of any bad weather. 239 passengers and crew were eager to reach their destination as the massive Boeing 777 lifted off the ground. And at 1:07 a.m., the last aircraft communications addressing and reporting system messages was sent and then shut off for unknown reasons. And at 1:19 a.m., First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid signs off from Malaysia Air Traffic Control with, "Good night, Malaysia 370.
Malaysian 370, contact Ho Chi Minh 120.9. Good night. Good night, Malaysian 370.
And this would be the last we hear from anyone aboard the plane. And 2 minutes after that, the aircraft's transponders stopped sending any signals, making it invisible to civilian radar. And Malaysian military radar continues to track the plane as it veers off course. And an hour later, the final radar ping of MH370 is recorded. It was last seen flying over the Indian Ocean near Phuket Island in the Strait of Malacca. And expecting MH370 to fly over soon, the people in the control tower monitor the radar and listen to the radio, but no contact ever comes through. And after a few hours of no contact, Malaysia and Vietnam searched for the missing plane to no avail. And on the 9th, the Malaysia military began searching for the plane at its last known location. And with no new evidence, people began to really wonder what happened on that flight. And after a few days, the Prime Minister of Malaysia announced that through investigation, it was determined that the flight flew for hours after losing contact. So it could literally be anywhere. And on March 24th, the Prime Minister would speak again, stating that the Malaysia government had presumed that the MH370 had crashed somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean and that there is no possibility of finding any survivors.
It is therefore with deep sadness and regret that I must inform you that according to this new data, flight MH370 ended in the southern Indian Ocean.
They would continue to search, hoping to find anything, but ultimately coming up empty-handed. And about a month later, an Australian border patrol ship named Ocean Shield picked up signals from a supposed black box near the Australian coast. And Malaysia would divert as much of the search to where the supposed pings came from, but again, nothing was found. And a year would pass and nothing would show up. And families and friends mourned those who lost their lives in this tragic mystery. And many around the world continued to wonder what happened to Malaysia Flight 370. And then, on the morning of July 15th, a man by the name of Johnny Begay discovered a massive piece of plane on the beaches of Reunion, a small island in the southern Indian Ocean. And Johnny claimed that he was just walking on the beach for a lunch break looking for a stone to use as a pestle when he discovered the massive part.
Je m'appelle Bec Genier, je travaille pour la station 3E, pour l'espace vert. Donc nous entrons dans le site du littoral et c'est là que mardi, j'étais en train de chercher un caillou. Un caillou, ça s'appelle pour piler les épices et que j'ai découvert le début d'avion qui était là, un peu sur le sable et un peu sur la mer.
And once the piece was picked up, it was later identified as the flaperon of Malaysia Flight 370. It was identified as MH370 due to a serial number that linked it to the Boeing 777s. And this was the first discovery that would start a chain of discoveries all along the southeast coast of Africa. And the next piece would be found located in the Zai, Mozambique. Zai. I'm sorry. A flap track fairing segment with the letters 676EB was identified as belonging to the MH370 due to the specific font and color only used by Malaysia Airlines. And on February 16th, 2016, Vilankulo, Mozambique, a stabilizer from the back of the plane was identified as belonging to MH370 through the specific stencil font. And from March 2016 to September 2016, most parts appeared in Madagascar, Zanzibar, Mauritius, and South Africa. So it was clear that the plane had crashed in the Indian Ocean and was torn to shreds. Now the currents were carrying the drifting wreckage to shore as a haunting reminder of an awful tragedy. And to this day, the location of the main wreckage is unknown despite millions and millions of dollars being poured into underwater exploration of 75,000 square mile area search. So what happened on that day? Why did the pilots turn around after taking off? And how long did the plane fly before crashing down into the cold ocean. So the first theory is the pilot murder slewer slide plot. One of the first things investigated by the Malaysian government was the homes and bank accounts of all 12 crew members aboard the plane. And after an extensive search, no odd transactions had occurred. Still, according to the Prime Minister of Australia, he heard that all of the highest government officials believed that it was a murder slewer slide plot by the pilots and crew. It would explain the sudden turn off course and the lack of communication. But they purposely did these things for reasons unknown. And if you weren't convinced before, there is one piece of evidence that is pretty damning. In 2016, New York Magazine was able to get classified documents from an investigation conducted by the FBI shortly after the disappearance of MH370. And in these documents, we learned that the captain of the flight, Zahari Shea, had used a flight simulator at home and flew a flight path nearly identical to the one that had occurred on that fateful day, a month before he took off. And as soon as the news broke, people were certain that the captain had purposely broken off from the flight path and flew into the Indian Ocean, just like he had done in the simulation. And even the Prime Minister of Malaysia claimed early on that he believed that the pilots purposely disabled communications.
Based on new satellite communication, we can say with a high degree of certainty that the aircraft communications addressing and reporting system, or ACUS, was disabled just before the aircraft reached the east coast of Peninsular Malaysia.
And who knows if the information was circumstantial, but nevertheless, it's incredibly incriminating and ties us to the next theory, which is that it was shot down. So the next theory claims that the United States shot the plane down for getting too close to the US military on the island of Diego Garcia in the southern Indian Ocean. And this would not be the first time the US shot down a civilian plane, believe it or not. On the 3rd of July, 1998, the US naval destroyer USS Vincennes shot 2 surface-to-air missiles at Iran Air Flight 655, hitting and killing all 290 passengers on board. And the US would claim that they thought it was an F-14 Tomcat fighter jet. So when MH370 went missing near a US naval base, many people remembered what they did all those years ago and speculated that they could have done the same thing again. And it is known that Malaysia Flight 370 was carrying roughly 500 pounds of lithium-ion batteries, which were being delivered to Motorola Solutions in Tianjin, China. And this would lead some people to believe that there were Chinese computer scientists aboard the plane that was responsible for hacking into the United States Department of Defense servers, and that the captain was working with the US to deliver them to the US. And as we mentioned earlier, the captain was practicing flying over the Indian Ocean. But that same report showed that he specifically spent time practicing landing on a small island airstrip in a Boeing 777. So on those islands he practiced landing on was Diego Garcia. But why would the US shoot down the plane if they had a pre-planned arrival? Well, either they mistook another passenger plane and shot it down, or they never planned on letting the plane land at all, and instead tricked the pilot into bringing the plane to them so they could just shoot it down and cause those scientists to fall face off the planet. And there is additional evidence to support this theory, because on March 18th, 2004, 10 days after the initial disappearance, an article from the Maldivian newspaper wrote that the residents of the, stay with me, Kudahavadu, we got there. A small atoll just north of Diego Garcia claimed to see a low-flying jumbo jet with red stripes across its side. And these reports would come at around 8 a.m. on March 8th and claimed that it was flying southeast towards Diego Garcia. And they also claimed to hear multiple sounds apart from the already loud jet. So if the plane crashed somewhere in the area of the atoll, then it would explain why the debris from the plane is showing up where they are. Ocean current maps show us that if they crashed somewhere in the area of the atoll, then it would have predictably washed up along the coast of Southeast Africa and Madagascar. So could the MH370 have been shot down by the US or any other world power? It's hard to say, and all of the debris that we have seen that has shown up has no signs of bullet holes or fire making it hard to believe that it was shot down. But reports from locals claiming that they saw a jumbo jet flying really low to the ground could point us to the right direction, so we can hopefully bring closer to the hundreds of families who lost a loved one on that day. But there are so many theories that could have occurred during Malaysia Flight 370. Some of the outlandish ones claim that the plane was hit by a meteor or sucked into a black hole. I feel like it's a bit of a stretch. And others claim, naturally, that aliens abducted the plane or that lithium batteries caught fire in the cargo hold and brought the plane down. A little bit more believable. Not the alien thing, but the other thing. But maybe. I don't know. They're saying aliens are in the ocean now, so I have no idea. But the disappearances have caught the attention of millions of onlookers for years. But I'd like to know what you think. For all the stories, what theory do you believe out of all of them? I'm very curious to know. I love having conversations with you guys down in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video and enjoyed learning about these crazy mass disappearances. If you have any other suggestions for videos on crimes, conspiracies, cults, serial killers, or murders, let me know down below and I will read it and like it. And until then, I will see your beautiful face in the next video. All right, bye.